Snow drifts from distant hills, falling in slow, deliberate sheets that blanket rooftops and roads alike, as if the world itself has paused to mourn. Each flake carries the weight of silence, a hush that smothers the living and the echoes of the dead alike. The snow grève l'amende, Samard. With Samard, the wind slides across frozen moors, carrying the scent of pine needles crushed underfoot, and beneath it, faintly, the acrid tang of iron from battlefields where men once fell, their names forgotten, their lives reduced to whispers in the frost. Death is never distant here. It lies in the hush between gusts, in the subtle crackle of ice over rivers, in the shadows that lengthen in the corridors of castles abandoned by cheer and celebration. Within the walls of one such fortress, the hall stretches vast and hollow, the ceilings high enough to trap the murmurs of centuries. Tapestries sag, torn and faded, their embroidered hunts and feasts frozen in a joy long past. The fires have burned to embers, leaving only a scent of smoke and old wood, a ghost of warmth. Here, a young page moves cautiously, the cloak he wears heavy with snow and dripping with cold. His eyes shine with a mixture of fear and curiosity, reflecting the fractured light that slips through shattered windows. Each footstep echoes like a drumbeat of memory across the stone floors, where once lords and ladies would have walked in laughter and argument, their voices now dissolved into air and stone. The page pauses in a corridor lined with empty thrones, their gilded arms dulled by dust. He glances over shattered glass that once gleamed in sunlight, now jagged, opaque, reflecting only the fragile flickers of a dying world. Somewhere beyond, the howl of wolves drifts across the moors, hollow and mournful, blending with the distant rattle of chains from dungeons long abandoned. It is a sound that speaks of hunger and patience, of the eternal watchfulness of creatures who remember only survival. The boy shivers, his breath visible in the frigid air, and yet he moves forward, drawn by something he cannot name, a story whispered from the stones themselves, or the weight of lives that have passed through this fortress like rivers beneath ice. In a small chapel, untouched by the chaos of men, a single candle struggles against the darkness. Its flame shudders with each gust, casting shadows that dance over stone saints, their faces inscrutable. To the page they are silent judges, watching the living with eyes that have seen both devotion and betrayal, love and carnage. He kneels for a moment, tracing the lines of a saint's face with a trembling finger, imagining the hands of countless worshippers, the prayers whispered into cold stone, prayers that rose like smoke and dissolved into nothingness. The chapel smells faintly of melted wax and damp stone, a scent that anchors him in the present, yet weighs him with the past. From the corner of the room, his gaze falls upon a rusted sword, its hilt engraved with names long vanished from memory. He bends to touch it, running his fingers over the cold, rough metal. The weight of it is more than iron. It is the weight of those who bore it into battle, who knelt before kings and died for causes now meaningless. He imagines their faces, their fear, their pride, the way their hearts must have raced beneath armor as heavy as regret. In that instant, he feels connected to them, a thread through time, fragile yet unbroken, stretching across the frozen years to his small shivering body. Outside, the kingdom lies asleep beneath a blanket of frost, every tower, road and courtyard, a monument to ambition and loyalty, to the victories celebrated, and the losses mourned. The wind rises, lifting snow like spilled ashes, scattering it across battlements and empty streets. In the white haze, the page senses the voice of the land itself, subtle, but unrelenting. It speaks not in words, but in absence. The absence of laughter, the absence of life bustling in the streets, the absence of warmth that once flowed from hearths now cold, yet in that silence, there is endurance, there is the quiet assertion of survival, of memory pressed into stone and frozen ground. He moves again, each step guided by instinct, by reverence for what has been and what lingers. Shadows stretch long across the courtyards, twisting around statues and fountains that have not known water in decades. The air bites at his cheeks, but he presses on, sensing the pulse of history beneath the frost, beneath the snow, beneath the fragile roofs that shiver under winter's weight. He passes through a gallery, where portraits of kings and knights peer down with painted eyes, solemn and accusatory. Their gazes are heavy with expectation, demanding that the living remember what the dead can no longer speak. At the edge of the battlements, he stops. The wind howls across the stone, tugging at his cloak and whipping strands of hair across his face. He peers into the whiteness of the moors beyond, imagining the campaigns waged here, the sieges that shattered walls and hearts alike. The fields that now lie silent, once rang with the clash of steel and the cries of men. The memory of their courage and their folly is etched into the frost, as enduring as the stone under his feet. He knows in a way beyond thought that these stories are not lost. They are whispered in every gust, every flake, every frozen river that cuts through the kingdom like a vein of ice. Descending from the battlements, the page finds himself back in the hall, where the tapestry of history drapes over every surface. He touches the stones, feeling the chill seep into his fingers, yet also a strange warmth, the warmth of connection, of understanding that even in abandonment, the fortress breathes. The halls speak in 1,000 subtle voices, the laughter of children who never grew old, the shouts of soldiers marching to uncertain fate, the quiet council of kings plotting in shadows. Each sound is a memory, suspended in the cold, waiting for someone to hear it. And as night falls, the candle in the chapel flickers once more, and the wind outside begins to die down. The kingdom, cloaked in frost, remains unbroken in spirit, if not in body. The page stands in silence, absorbing the weight of everything that has passed through these walls, the victories, the betrayals, the fleeting moments of joy, the endless succession of sorrow. He knows that even in the stillness, life persists, that even in silence, the kingdom speaks. Stories of blood and loyalty, of ambition and decay, of the fragile endurance of those who remain, are etched in every stone, every flake of snow, every cold gust of wind. And for a moment, standing amidst it all, he is not a lone boy in a dying castle. He is the keeper of memory, the witness to history, and the echo of 1,000 voices that will not be forgotten. The frost clings to the walls like a veil, and the page turns, moving toward corridors, still shadowed, still holding secrets. Beyond the hall, beyond the chapel, beyond the battlements, the kingdom waits, patient and eternal. It waits for the next story, the next memory, the next soul willing to hear its whispers, and in the hush of the snow-covered night, the page listens, as should we all. A crimson sun sinks behind the jagged ridge, spilling molten light across a landscape hollowed by conquest. Shadows stretch long and tremble across the remnants of villages, their timber skeletons blackened by fire, their streets scarred by the iron tread of armies. The air is heavy with the bitter tang of smoke, the metallic bite of blood, and the damp rot of churned mud, where oxen once plowed in rhythm with the seasons. Silence clings to the fields, broken only by the occasional gust that rattles broken shutters and stirs the brittle bones of abandoned carts. In a half-collapsed inn, its roof sagging like the weary shoulders of an old man, the innkeeper sits on a splintered bench. His hands, stiff from cold and grief, count coins with mechanical precision, though the hearth beside him has long surrendered its fire. Ash drifts through the shattered window, like soft snow, settling on the floorboards and on the furrowed lines of his face. Each coin he touches carries the weight of lives extinguished, of laughter that once rose in this hall, but now exists only in memory, as fragile as the walls that barely hold the night at bay. Outside, the wind carries a plaintive sound through the skeletal trees, a harp, its strings frayed and whispering, echoing through the forest where deer tread lightly over charred stumps. The notes are hesitant, a trembling voice in a landscape that has lost its song. The animals, survivors of the burning, pause as if listening, their breaths shallow and cautious, shadows flickering across the undergrowth. The forest itself seems to mourn, each broken branch and ash-cloaked root a testament to the passage of fire and sword. Along the main road, a knight's gauntlet lies abandoned, its leather cracked, its metal dulled, it catches the dying light for a heartbeat, a faint glimmer that tells of bravery extinguished and despair endured. No hand will claim it, no shield will bear its story forward. It is a relic of courage and failure, a silent sentinel to a war that moved like a storm across the lands, leaving nothing unscarred. Passers-by, if any still dare to tread here, step over it with a mix of reverence and dread, as though disturbing it might awaken ghosts. The town well, once a gathering place where children laughed and elders shared stories, now mirrors the blood-orange sky. The water's surface, darkened by soot and detritus, becomes a pool of sorrow, reflecting the emptiness that war has sown. Around it, footprints vanish into mud, fragments of lives scattered like seeds before a storm. The well, the heart of the community, now offers only silence, a hollow echo of togetherness ripped from the earth. Every drop of water seems heavy with absence, each ripple carrying the memory of those who once leaned over its edge with hope. In a narrow alley, a dog lingers, sniffing at a rusted key. It nudges the small object with a nose wet from the evening dew, a relic left by hands that will never return to claim it. The dog tilts its head, sensing the weight of loss in the metal, in the empty alley, lined with stones that have known laughter, footsteps, and whispers. It is an intimate moment of quiet grief amid devastation, a simple act bridging the living and the vanished. The innkeeper lifts his gaze toward the ridge, where the last light of day clings to the jagged peaks. In that stillness, he feels the absence of kings and soldiers alike, the void left by the ceaseless march of conquest. There is no victory here, only endurance, and the fragile pulse of life, persisting against an indifferent sky. His eyes trace the horizon, searching for a sign of mercy, a sign of return, and find only wind stirring the charred remains of what once was. As night falls, the first stars pierce the gloom. They are pale, distant fires in a sky, emptied of warmth, each one a reminder that even in the deepest shadow, light survives. Whispers of the vanished drift through the streets and forests, stories of those carried away by war's unrelenting tide. They linger like smoke, twisting through ruined corridors, brushing against stone and timber, and settling quietly in the minds of those left behind. The innkeeper feels them in the hush, in the sway of the trees, in the faint tremor of the earth beneath his bench. They are enduring and silent, witnesses to all that has passed, and all that might yet come. A crow circles overhead, its wings slicing the night air, its call pierces the silence, sharp and accusatory, as though reminding the living that the dead watch and remember. The sound echoes across rooftops, bouncing off walls blackened by fire, mingling with the whisper of the harp strings in the forest. Every note, every cry, every tremor in the earth, carries the memory of what was lost, and the promise that nothing truly disappears. Shadows lengthen further, pooling in corners and alleys, pressing against the stones with the weight of absence. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of ash and damp earth, mingling with the faint sweetness of herbs long trampled underfoot. It moves like a breath through the village, lifting dust motes, scattering the memories of the fallen, and hinting at a world that still breathes beneath the ruins. The innkeeper stands slowly, the coins forgotten, and steps outside. His boots sink into mud that has known the weight of armies, and he feels the cold bite of night against his skin. He looks toward the ridge once more, the horizon now a dim line between earth and sky, and for a moment, the vastness of the world presses against him, both fragile and infinite. A single torch flickers in the distance, held by a figure moving cautiously through the mist. Its light dances across broken walls and splintered doors, casting fleeting warmth onto stones etched with scars. The innkeeper watches, heart stirring with a quiet, unspoken hope, proof that life, however tentative, persists. Somewhere beyond the ridge, beyond the fields of mud and ash, the stories continue. The vanished whisper still, waiting to be remembered, while the living carry their own burdens forward into the night. In the silence that follows, the forest exhales, the wind stills, and the stars burn quietly overhead. Shadows of the past mingle with the fragile shapes of the present. Every broken roof, Every rusted key, every abandoned gauntlet, is a fragment of a larger story, a story of resilience, of sorrow, of fleeting courage against an unyielding world. And as the night deepens, the innkeeper turns back toward the half-collapsed inn, a single figure amid the ruin, holding in his gaze the reflection of a world both broken and eternal, ready to witness whatever dawn may come. The first light of morning seeps through the curling smoke of torched villages, soft as a sigh, yet sharp enough to burn the eyes. It drapes over walls scarred with time and assault, illuminating cracks where mortar once held secrets and laughter. The air carries the acrid tang of wet straw, the bitter smoke of timber surrendered to flame, and the faint metallic echo of blood long cooled. Somewhere, a crow caws thrice, each note a knell marking the fragile beginning of a day that promises nothing but memory and toil. In the ruined manor, shadows cling to corners like mourning cloaks. A lady kneels before the fractured portraits of ancestors, each frame a window to a world that no longer breathes. Her fingers trace the dust, brushing away centuries of neglect, yet the painted eyes follow her with silent reproach. The women and men of these images stare with a solemnity that feels accusatory, or perhaps sorrowful, as though they remember every betrayal that passed through these halls. She lifts a shard of stained glass, fragments of saints and kings refracted in the early light, a fragile kaleidoscope of faith and sorrow. The colors tremble across her hands, vivid and fleeting, like the pulse of a heart still beating beneath layers of stone and history. Beyond the manor, the streets lie empty. The echo of hooves on cobblestones drifts like a heartbeat through the morning mist, recalling soldiers who once paraded with banners of gold and crimson, their courage, their pride, their cruelty. Everything that once made this place vibrant now lies dormant, swallowed by ruin and silence. Moss creeps over shattered steps, the remnants of siege engines resting in the nearby forest, rusted iron teeth dulled by rain, forgotten in the relentless rhythm of seasons. Each piece tells a story of ambition that met resistance, of men who wielded power with certainty, and fell without ceremony, of tools that were once instruments of fear, now softened by time and decay. Children emerge, tentative as ghosts, from the shadowed alleyways. Barefoot and wary, they gather around a well, dipping their hands into water that tastes faintly of ash. The liquid shimmers with soot, reflecting a sky smeared with smoke, and yet they drink. Their eyes, wide with curiosity and hunger, seem to hold every question the world has failed to answer. Each gulp is survival, each glance a testament to endurance. The wind rises, brushing against their hair, tugging at the hems of tattered garments, carrying with it whispers of exile and loyalty, of promises broken and oaths silently kept. From the chapel atop the hill comes a bell, uneven, hesitant, trembling as if uncertain of its own existence. Its toll drifts through the village, carrying with it a resonance older than memory, older than the stones it vibrates against. Time itself seems to bend in this sound, as though it hesitates between past and present, between the living and the shadows that cling to every doorway. In the manor, the lady pauses, her gaze drawn upward. The bell tolls again, uneven yet insistent, and for a moment, it feels as though the world itself is holding its breath, waiting for an answer that will not come. Inside, the manor exhales the weight of centuries. Curtains, moth-eaten and heavy with dust, stir in the draught, brushing against walls carved with heraldry and history. The scent of candle smoke lingers, mingling with the decay of wood and fabric. Every step on the cold stone floor echoes like a whispered confession. She moves slowly, reverently, over the remnants of what was once a life filled with ritual and ceremony. The brush of silk against stone, faint and ghostly, reminds her of dances that are no more, of laughter that no one remembers, of music that no longer exists except in the fragile memory of these walls. Outside, the forest is alive with stillness. Moss drapes over fallen siege engines like funerary shrouds, the remnants of war softened by rain and shadow. The trees sway, carrying with them scents of earth and decay, of smoke and ash. whispering secrets only the wind can translate. Somewhere, a deer leaps through the underbrush, startled by an echo of memory, the distant clash of steel, the shout of commanders, the stamp of boots on sodden earth. It pauses, ears flicking, as if aware that the world it inhabits is layered atop another, one of fire and fury, of kings and soldiers, of dreams that were promised and never delivered. The lady stands in the courtyard, holding a shard of glass aloft. The morning light fractures into rainbows that dance across her hands and spill over the stones like fleeting hope. She closes her eyes, imagining the voices of the past, those who prayed in these halls, who feasted at these tables, who fell in loyalty and despair. She feels their absence as a physical weight pressing against her chest. The wind brushes her hair back, whispering of lives undone, of stories waiting in shadowed corners to be spoken aloud. She knows the world remembers in fragments, in shards, in echoes of color and sound, yet she bends over the glass, as if she could gather all of it, hold it, reconcile it with what remains. Children laugh faintly near the well, a brittle sound, bright against the muted ruin. Their laughter is an affirmation, a defiance against silence, against loss, against the invisible chains of history pressing upon them. One child splashes, and the ripples catch light like liquid gold, shivering across the surface of water touched by ash. The lady watches, a soft exhale slipping from her lips, a mixture of sorrow and hope. Perhaps the world does endure, even when the stones crumble and the banners fade. Perhaps memory, though heavy and haunted, is not enough to destroy the pulse of life. The day grows, and the smoke of torched villages rises higher, dissolving into pale sky. Crows wheel overhead, their cries both lament and herald. Hooves strike the streets again, phantom echoes of parades long ended. Inside the manor, the lady kneels once more, touching a portrait, whispering a prayer to faces frozen in oil and guilt. Outside, the chapel bell tolls, uneven, insistent, echoing through hollowed streets and empty halls. It calls to the living and the dead alike, threading the past into the present, inviting reflection, mourning, and the fragile hope of renewal. In this world of ruin and remembrance, every object, every fragment, every whisper carries weight. The shard of glass in her hand, the ash-laden water at the well, the moss over broken iron, they speak of time's cruelty, of ambition undone, of lives both ordinary and heroic, swept away by forces greater than themselves. Yet amidst the ruin, life stirs in the softest gestures, the tilt of a head, the brush of fingers over dust, the quiet resilience of children who endure. The morning, though shadowed with sorrow, promises continuity. It reminds those who remain that history is not only what has been lost, it is also what survives, fragile and luminous, waiting to be remembered, waiting to be honored, waiting to breathe once more. And so, beneath the rising sun and the drifting smoke, the lady rises, holding the shard of light and color as witness. The wind brushes past, carrying whispers of loyalty, exile, and faith. Somewhere, deep in the forest, the remnants of war sleep beneath moss and rain. The chapel bell tolls again, uneven, hesitant, yet persistent, marking time in a world that has changed yet endures. Here, amidst rubble, ash, and memory, the living remember, and in remembering, they begin to write the next chapter. Rain fell in a soft, relentless drizzle, threading the streets with rivulets of mud that swallowed boots and carts alike. The town lay wounded, its once proud stones slick with the sheen of moisture, reflecting the gray, sullen sky above. A merchant's cart had toppled in the central square, barrels of grain spilling into the mire. The scent of fermenting grain rose, sweet yet sour, a quiet testament to decay hidden beneath a fleeting sweetness. Each droplet that struck the cobblestones seemed to whisper of loss, of commerce interrupted, of lives once measured in ordinary exchange now suspended in survival. In the distance, hammers rang against splintered gates, carrying their hollow rhythm across empty squares. The sound was both labor and lamentation, a heartbeat of a town clinging to itself. The gates themselves seemed alive with the memory of their fall, each strike echoing the ghosts of those who had built, defended, and now abandoned them. The echoes folded into the fog, mingling with the murmur of dripping roofs and the occasional shout of children navigating the ruins of their playground. Laughter, brittle and fleeting, rose and fell like smoke in the wind, an attempt to stitch joy into a tapestry unraveling beneath war and weather. Within a shattered chapel, the priest's fingers traced the cracks in the pews, feeling the rough wood press against his skin like the pulse of history itself. He whispered prayers into the void, each word swallowed by silence, absorbed by the damp stone walls that had known more devotion than any human could recall. The candle smoke clung to him, curling in lazy spirals that carried both the scent of devotion and the faint tang of damp decay. Sacred and profane collided invisibly in this space, the incense, the mud, the candlelight reflecting on wet stone, and the priest's heart beat with the knowledge that what remained here was fragile, precarious, yet stubbornly enduring. Children ran through the rubble outside, their small hands clutching fragments of toys and splintered beams. They laughed in bursts that cracked against the stillness, a brittle armor against the world's disintegration. The stones they clambered over remembered feet that once danced in celebration, feet that had marched to battle, that had knelt in prayer. Their joy was tentative, as if each squeal might break under the weight of the town's sorrow, but they persisted, weaving light through the gray with innocence unbroken by circumstance. A tattered tapestry flapped against the wind in the hall above, a monarch rendered in threadbare color, whose deeds now existed only in memory and dust. The fabric trembled with each gust, carrying with it the weight of a lineage erased, of victories and betrayals folded into cloth. Its image, once vibrant, now faded, became a silent witness to the decay of time, a reminder that even greatness bends under the pressure of neglect and the inexorable pull of seasons. Inside the town hall, ledgers lay half-burnt, ink bleeding like tears across the pages, smeared into a narrative only partially preserved. The sweep of a broom against charred floors, the soft clink of coins handled with care, the careful folding of hands in silent vigil, all gestures bore the gravity of survival. Each movement was both mundane and monumental, the smallest acts of endurance amplified in a world stripped to essentials. Memory itself seemed to cling to these motions, as if the mere repetition of a ritual could stave off oblivion. The priest emerged at last, stepping onto the threshold as night pressed its damp fingers across the town. The rain soaked through his robe, chilling him, but he stood, eyes fixed on the shadows that crept across the streets. Each puddle reflected fragments of ruin, a broken gate, a toppled cart, children still daring to play. The wind carried the smell of mud and smoke together, an olfactory hymn to the town's endurance and its grief. For a moment, the vastness of loss seemed infinite, yet intimate, the collapse of a kingdom mirrored in the shiver of a child's laughter, in the silent collapse of a candle's flame. Above him, the clouds drifted like ghosts across the sky, dark and heavy, yet pierced by streaks of fading light. The priest's hand rested briefly on the wooden lintel, the grooves of old scars familiar beneath his fingers, and he felt a curious reverence for the brokenness surrounding him. The town, in its ruin, whispered stories of those who had walked these streets, who had knelt, labored, and wept. And though the night pressed on, he sensed that within the debris, within the silence, the soul of this place endured, fragile yet unyielding, waiting for the dawn that would rise slow and uncertain over mud and memory alike. The children's laughter faded into the distance, mingling with the rhythm of hammers still striking somewhere beyond the fog. Shadows pooled in the corners of empty streets, dancing to the whisper of rain, as if the town itself inhaled, exhaled, and held its breath between moments of despair and hope. The priest lifted his gaze to the horizon where the first stars, timid and trembling, began to pierce the gloom. In that quiet soaked moment, the kingdom's ruin felt both boundless and near, a canvas of sorrow painted with devotion, memory, and the unspoken promise that even in desolation, some part of life, some ember of reverence, persisted. Night descends with a shiver, draping the battlefield in a velvet darkness that swallows the edges of reality. Only the dying flicker of scattered fires marks where men and beasts once clashed, their shadows trembling across the torn earth like ghosts unwilling to leave. The scent of damp leather and blood-soaked moss lingers in the trenches, sticky and clinging, where the wounded press themselves against shattered walls, clinging to shreds of cloth and scraps of hope alike. Somewhere in the hollowed silence, a groan rises, half prayer, half curse, mingling with the distant echo of a bell long silenced. Within the keep, a knight leans against a marble column, helmet held in hand. His fingers trace the carved saints, their faces chipped and marred, eroded by the indiscriminate fury of cannon fire, the clumsiness of looters, and the passage of years that knows no loyalty. The stones are cold under his palm, yet the air itself seems heavier here, thick with the sighs of those who once held court, the whispers of ambition and betrayal absorbed into the walls. He closes his eyes for a heartbeat, and the past slides over him like fog, carrying the echo of vows sworn in cathedral shadows, and the roar of battles fought beneath the relentless clang of bronze bells. Below, the dungeons breathe a damp, fetid air, chains clink softly against stone, a rhythm of despair as captives murmur names of absent kings, their voices swallowed by the darkness. The wind snakes down the corridors, carrying hints of rot, the sting of wet earth, and, impossibly, the delicate perfume of wild flowers that still cling stubbornly to life outside the shattered walls. It is a cruel reminder that even in devastation, life presses on, fragile and indifferent, growing from the cracks of broken stone. A banner, half torn and crusted with frost, quivers atop the keep like a heart straining to beat beneath the weight of grief. The knight's eyes fall upon a small wooden cross lying among the debris, its edges splintered, its surface worn smooth by hands now gone. He kneels, tracing the rough grain, feeling the weight of generations, the silent, relentless march of ambition, bloodshed, and dreams burned away in the fires of conquest. Each mark in the wood whispers a name, a memory, a loss. It is both tender and unbearable, a symbol of faith surviving where men have failed. Memories drift over him like smoke, curling into the corners of the ruined hall. He remembers the warmth of a chapel lit by candles, the soft murmur of prayers rising with incense smoke. He remembers the flash of steel under a sun-streaked sky, the shouts of men swallowed by the thunder of horses' hooves. He recalls comrades fallen, their faces pressed into mud and grass, eyes wide with the shock of betrayal, or the mercy of an unseen blade. All these moments, vivid and terrible, swirl around him, suspended in time. The world itself seems to hang between what was and what will never be, a precarious balance of life and death, courage and despair. Outside, the wind sighs over the battlefield, tugging at the banners, rattling the shattered gates, carrying the faintest echoes of songs sung by voices long gone. It weaves through the trenches, tugging at loose cloth and torn armor, threading a mournful melody among the stones. Somewhere a fox moves, silent on the blackened earth, smelling the scent of human struggle, of blood and hunger and longing. Nature continues its indifferent rhythm, a silent witness to the vanity of kings and the impermanence of power. The knight rises, helmet in hand, and steps toward the ruined battlements. Each footfall echoes in the hollowed keep, a measured cadence in the stillness. He pauses, letting his gaze drift over the carnage below, the scorched earth, pocked with craters, and littered with the remnants of valor. Shadows stretch across the ruins like fingers, pointing toward the past, toward promises broken and dreams abandoned. In the hush, he hears the faint stirrings of survivors, shuffling through ash and debris, their faces gaunt, their eyes hollow but defiant. Life endures, stubborn and silent, like moss growing over forgotten graves. In the courtyard, a single torch flickers against the night wind, throwing elongated shadows across the stones. The knight watches as the light dances across fragments of armor, across helmets dented and bloodied, across banners that cling desperately to their poles. He feels the pull of memory, of camaraderie, of oaths sworn under stars that no longer shine, of the laughter of men who would never laugh again. Each sound, each shadow, each scent carries the weight of history, the tangible proof of human striving, suffering, and survival. An owl glides silently over the ruins, wings brushing the chill air, eyes piercing the darkness. It pauses in the night above the keep, watching, listening, as if the kingdom's story is written, not in chronicles, but in the quiet endurance of those who remain. The night watches the bird disappear into the blackness, sensing that this night, like so many before, is neither wholly an end nor a beginning. There is a story that lives on in whispers, in smoke, in the echo of chains and bells, a story of courage and loss, of faith pressed between the teeth of cruelty and time. He turns back toward the keep, passing broken arches and shattered statues, feeling the lingering presence of those who once walked these halls. The air carries a chill, but also a strange comfort, the knowledge that even amidst ruin, life persists, memory endures, and the pulse of human ambition continues to beat beneath the frost. He pauses once more by the cross, letting his hand brush the splintered wood, and for a moment, he allows himself a quiet prayer, not for victory, not for glory, but for remembrance. The wind rises again, sweeping across the battlefield, and carrying with it the faint hum of a world that refuses to die. The night listens, absorbing the silence and the sorrow, the small victories hidden among the vast losses. Somewhere, beyond the shadowed horizon, the first signs of dawn begin to stir, a pale promise against the endless night. And yet, the story of this kingdom, of ambition, of blood, of fleeting glory, remains suspended, alive in the quiet corners of memory, whispered by those who survive to witness, to endure, to carry forward the fragile light of hope. In the stillness, he realizes that history is never fully written, never fully known. It exists in the small quiet acts of endurance, in the whispered names of the lost, in the trembling banner, in the cross left by an unknown hand. And as the owl disappears into the distance, as the torch flickers and dies, as the first cold light of morning brushes the stones, the night understands, this kingdom's tale is not finished, nor is it entirely remembered. It lives on, in echoes, in shadows, in those who remain to tell it. And so, under a sky heavy with stars and silence, he steps into the dawn, carrying the weight of memory, of blood, of ambition, and of hope, ready to face what comes next. Dawn arrives like molten gold, spilling across a landscape ravaged by despair. The fields, once fertile, lie trampled under the weight of armies, scarred by the churned soil of fleeing hooves. Orchards, once fragrant with spring blossoms, stand blackened and broken, their branches clawing at the sky like pleading hands. The air carries the acrid sting of smoke, tangled with the damp bitterness of trenches dug in desperation, where men whispered prayers they no longer believed. Somewhere in the distance, a drum of war echoes, a hollow, relentless heartbeat that seems to belong to another age, another life, one lost beneath the footfalls of conquest. In the shadow of a crumbling castle, a young scribe sits amid the ruin, ink-stained hands trembling over vellum. His eyes are wide with the weight of memory, tracing names no living tongue dares speak aloud. Each stroke of his quill is a ritual, a fragile defiance against the void that seeks to swallow the dead. The parchment absorbs grief and glory alike, as if it might hold the pulse of those long silenced. Every distant shout, every clash of steel, resonates through him, a cruel reminder that the living and the dead are bound by the same merciless drumbeat of history. The scent of roasted meat, abandoned mid-feast, curls with the copper tang of spilled blood, a haunting perfume of feasts turned to carnage. Wine flows from shattered casks, a river of red over the cobblestones, and somewhere, a dog gnaws at a forgotten bone, as though reclaiming some piece of the vanished revelry. In the castle kitchen, a lone maid sweeps ash from cold hearths, her movements precise, ritualistic. She traces circles in dust, a silent homage to lives ended by crowns and oaths heavier than the weight of steel. Her hands are steady, but her eyes betray the tremor of memory, the shadows of laughter and screams that linger, trapped in the corners of empty halls. A blackened lute leans against the wall, its strings snapped and fretting dust, a mute witness to songs unsung and love betrayed. She brushes her fingers along its cracked wood, feeling the echoes of melodies that no longer have voices. Somewhere, behind the walls, a knight once sang to a lover who never returned, and the air still vibrates with the sorrow of notes long faded. Outside, the wind carries whispers through the broken battlements, lifting loose leaves like fragments of forgotten letters, rustling secrets of devotion, treachery, and hope that dared to bloom amidst ruin. In the forest beyond the kingdom's edge, ravens wheel above the frost-etched bones of knights who rode too far. Armor lies dulled, scratched, and tarnished, reflecting a pale, indifferent sun. The birds descend in black arcs, their wings slicing the cold air, gathering where loyalty met recklessness. The trees, skeletal in winter's grasp, sway with a soft, mournful rhythm, leaves whispering of exile and unfulfilled oaths. Every sigh of wind carries a warning, a remembrance that the ambition of men often lingers in shadows, waiting to ensnare the unwary who step too boldly into history's depths. By the river, a forgotten bridge stretches across currents that have no memory of the hands that carved them. Stone worn smooth by the passage of time bears the scratches of desperation, names etched into granite, vows whispered into waters that will erase them with patient certainty. The scribe watches the reflection of dawn fracture on the surface, as if the world itself shivers beneath the weight of remembrance. He dips his quill again, the ink trembling with the possibility of resurrection, summoning voices, binding sorrow and valor together in lines that might outlast the fleeting life of men. Footsteps echo along deserted corridors, the hollow cadence of those who once traversed these halls in armor and ambition. The castle groans under its own age, stone shifting and sighing as if mourning the lives it has witnessed. From the high tower, a shattered banner flaps weakly in the wind, the threads of once proud colors snagged and frayed. Its movements are slow, deliberate, a hesitant heartbeat against the silence, and the scribe imagines the soldiers who held it high, the cries of victory and despair mingling in a chorus lost to time. The air grows colder as the sun climbs, scattering gold and shadow across the ruined land. The scribe pauses, his quill hovering above the page, and listens to the silence that presses in like a tide. Somewhere, beneath the horizon, a blacksmith hammers, perhaps still shaping swords for wars yet to come. Somewhere, a child cries, a sound fragile against the weight of history. The scribe writes their names too, letting ink carry the echo of those invisible, fleeting lives, binding them to memory even as the world around him forgets. He rises at last, the vellum clutched close, a fragile shield against the erosion of time. Outside, the wind carries the scent of ash and frost, of iron and decay. Ravens wheel overhead, their cries sharper, more insistent, as if urging him onward. The forest looms ahead, dark and infinite, hiding secrets that have no eyes to witness, only the patience of shadows. The bridge by the river waits, silent but enduring, a threshold between the world that was and the one yet to be written. The scribe steps forward, boots crunching in frost-hardened soil, and feels the tremor of the land beneath him, a rhythm older than kings, older than crowns. Dawn spills across his shoulders, a thin light against the dark, illuminating the blackened fields, and the fragile hope that still lingers among ruin. He carries ink and memory, grief and love, forward into the unknown, for each name he writes is a defiance, each line a promise that the dead will speak, even if the living will not listen. And as the sun rises higher, gilding the splintered walls of castles and the frost-stung branches of forests, he knows that this day, like all days before it, will pass into shadow. Yet in the ink of his hand, the memory of fire and blood, of loyalty betrayed and courage unbroken, will endure. The bridge, the lute, the ash, each is a whisper, a reminder, a question posed to those who follow. What will you remember, and what will you let vanish beneath the currents of time? Dawn is no longer just light, it is a reckoning. And somewhere, just beyond the horizon, the story waits to continue, patient, relentless, eternal. A heavy fog crawls over the crumbling battlements, curling along the jagged edges of stone, as if the castle itself exhales in sorrow. The scent of damp mortar and charred timber hangs in the morning air, sharp and clinging, mingling with the faint acrid trace of what was fire. From the tower, a lone figure leans against the cold, slick wall, eyes scanning the valley below, where the ghosts of an army lie scattered. Rusted helmets glint weakly through the mist, shields splintered and cracked, banners tattered, their colors dulled by wind and smoke. Every fragment seems frozen in a moment that never ends, a tableau of ambition turned to ash. The distant tolling of the abbey bell carries across the hollow expanse, each slow chime a dirge for voices long silenced. It moves through the fog like a pulse, echoing in the ruins, calling back the cries of men who fought and bled and vanished into memory. Amid this desolation, a child moves cautiously among the remains, hair matted with ash, small hands sifting through shards of once proud finery. Eyes wide and unblinking, she lifts a broken goblet, the faint glimmer of silver tarnished by smoke and dirt. The remnants of what had been a feast lie scattered, crumbled bread, dried fruit, blackened by fire, wine turned to thick stain upon the stones. Each fragment is a story, a life paused mid-breath, a joy extinguished by the cruel hand of fate. She pauses, inhaling the cold air, tasting the salt of yesterday's tears on her lips, the air carrying whispers of laughter that will never return. The curl of smoke from extinguished torches drifts around her, ghostly fingers tracing the spaces where soldiers once gathered, where music once danced across the hall. Every step she takes presses into frost-hardened soil, each imprint a quiet testament to endurance. There is a rhythm here, though it is broken, a cadence marked by absence. Once, these grounds had thundered with the march of boots, the metallic clash of armor, the proud chorus of men bound by loyalty to banners that promised glory. Now, there is only the memory of that march, each step a weight heavier than iron, each shadow a reminder of promises shattered. In the hollowed hall, sunlight barely reaches through cracks in the roof, catching on a manuscript half buried beneath rubble. Its pages are mottled with ash and blood, yet the ink has endured, the stories of vows broken, of alliances torn asunder, etched faintly like the echoes of a long-forgotten prayer. The wind whispers through the shattered arches, carrying with it the scent of scorched timber and iron. A bird, gray as ash, takes flight across the valley, its wings slicing the fog, a silent witness to the ruin below. The child freezes, head tilted, listening to the hollow cries that seem not entirely natural, as though the walls themselves murmur the history they have swallowed. Here, grief is ceremonial, it is measured not in tears, but in the quiet clatter of broken dishes, the sigh of banners stirred by a wind that remembers. Survival is not heroic, it is a matter of existing between the spaces left by devastation, of learning to breathe where others have fallen. The figure in the tower shifts, and their hand rests on the hilt of a rusted sword. The metal is cold, rough under fingers that tremble with the memory of battles fought for causes lost. It is not merely a weapon, it is the weight of countless lives, the loyalty demanded, the sacrifice unacknowledged, the innocence scattered in the mud. They lift it, and the earth seems to exhale with the movement, a valley sighing under the burden of memory. Every dent in the blade, every darkened stain, speaks of a story too heavy for the living to carry. A sudden gust sweeps through the battlements, and the fog thickens, swallowing edges, erasing boundaries. Shadows gather and dissolve, indistinct shapes of what once were people, a commander shouting orders that no one heeds, a mother clutching a child against the chaos, soldiers falling and rising again in the fog of memory. The child bends, lifting another fragment from the ground, a necklace of twisted silver, cold and meaningless now, yet brimming with echoes of the laughter and songs it once adorned. She pauses, eyes catching the flicker of light on metal, a reflection that reminds her that the world was once alive here, vibrant with life and color and warmth. In the heart of the ruin, the manuscript rests like a relic of conscience. Its ink, blurred but persistent, tells of kings and queens, of treachery under candlelight, of prayers whispered into stone. It is both confession and testament, a voice for those who cannot speak. Fingers brush the pages, disturbed dust swirling in the thin light, and the words seem to rise from the page like smoke, weaving into the air, mingling with the scent of the fallen. They speak of loyalty betrayed, of ambition unchecked, of the fragile thread that binds the living to memory. The bell tolls again, each echo folding into the next, a rhythm both mournful and eternal. The child pauses, listening, and the figure in the tower feels the resonance through their bones, a tremor that carries not just sound but sorrow, not just time but loss. It is as if the valley itself remembers, remembering the courage, the fear, the hunger, the fleeting joys of a life interrupted by fire and steel. And yet, in the quiet, there is a strange persistence. The fog curls, the smoke lingers, the banners shiver in the wind. Life finds a way, even among ruins. Tiny green shoots push through the frost-hardened soil, defiant and trembling, as though the earth itself insists that memory must endure alongside renewal. The child rises, clasping the broken necklace, her gaze sweeping the valley, her shadow stretching long across stone and mud. Each step forward is tentative, but it carries the echo of resilience, the fragile hope that from devastation, something might yet grow. The sword falls from the figure's hand with a dull clang, settling in the mud. The valley exhales a solemn silence that seems to stretch into eternity, yet within it lies a question, whispered on the wind: who will remember, who will carry the weight of what was lost? And in the soft shiver of fog and smoke, in the pale light that struggles through the ruins, there is a promise unspoken, that memory, though fragile, is never truly extinguished. The child's footsteps fade, the wind carries the faint scent of fire and iron, and the ruins lie waiting, patient and enduring, for the next echo to awaken their stories once more. The battlements, scarred and weeping with moss, remain steadfast against the creeping fog, silent sentinels guarding the sorrow and hope entwined in the valley below. And as the morning deepens, the first uncertain sun pierces the mist, glinting off broken armor and shattered stone, casting long trembling shadows that stretch toward the future yet unwritten.